Picture this for a moment. You're perched on an icy marble bench, stone seeping through your skin. On one side sits a senator, wrapped in status and silence. On the other, a merchant counting profits in his head. Across from you, about 20 other Romans go about the exact same business. No walls. No doors. No sense of personal space at all. Then it begins. What you're contributing to society drops, and keeps dropping, plunging nearly 50 meters straight down into a roaring, echo-filled abyss of sewage beneath the city. This is ancient Rome, where something as ordinary as using the bathroom was both a feat of engineering and, honestly, a brush with death. Welcome to Dark History, where we dig into the strange, brilliant, and downright unsettling stories your history teacher probably skipped. Today's topic? Toilets. But not just any toilets. We're talking about the most advanced, most communal, and quite possibly the most terrifying public restrooms humanity has ever built, the latrines of ancient Rome. And yes, this isn't clickbait. We're about to explore a sanitation system so advanced it makes you seriously question how humanity managed to forget plumbing for the next 1,000 years. But before we dive in, if you enjoy uncovering history's weirdest and wildest moments, go ahead and hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Trust me, this ride gets messy in the best way possible. Alright, let's flash ourselves straight back through time. Before we marvel at the insane engineering behind Roman toilets, we need to understand why this even mattered. Because here's an uncomfortable truth: humans have always had the same unavoidable problem. We poop. A lot. A city of roughly 1 million people, which Rome absolutely was at its height, produces around 145,000 tons of human waste every single year. To put that into perspective, that's about the weight of 1,000 blue whales, made entirely of poop. Most ancient civilizations didn't exactly have a plan for this. And by didn't have a plan, I mean they really didn't have a plan. In ancient Mesopotamia, people tossed waste directly into the streets or nearby rivers. In ancient Egypt, they dug simple pits. Medieval European cities relied on chamber pots that were casually dumped out of windows, sometimes directly onto unsuspecting pedestrians. There's even a French warning phrase for it, garde l'eau, meaning watch out for the water. Except, of course, it wasn't water. The Romans, however, took one look at this growing mountain of filth and asked a different question: what if we organized this? And they didn't just organize it, they engineered one of the most impressive sanitation systems the world has ever seen. It worked so well that when it eventually collapsed during the Dark Ages, European cities quite literally spent centuries drowning in their own waste. So what made Rome stand apart? Enter the true star of the show, the Cloaca Maxima. Translated from Latin, it means the greatest sewer. And no, the Romans were not exaggerating. Construction began around 600 before the Common Era, approximately 2,600 years ago. At first, it was just an open-air drainage channel meant to dry out the swampy land between Rome's 7 hills. But over time, century after century, it was covered, expanded, and transformed into a vast underground network so impressive it would make modern civil engineers tear up with joy. At its height, the Cloaca Maxima was large enough for a wagon to pass through. Some sections stretched over 3 meters wide and 4 meters tall. Altogether, it ran for more than 16 kilometers beneath the city, collecting waste from private homes, public latrines, bathhouses, and even the blood washed away from gladiator battles at the Colosseum. Everything eventually entered into the Tiber River, which, to be fair, wasn't great for the river, but it kept the city itself shockingly clean. And here's the part that really blows your mind: sections of the Cloaca Maxima are still in use today. After 2,600 years, tourists in Rome are literally walking over a functioning sewer system that predates Jesus, predates most major religions, and predates most modern nations, and it's still doing its job. Roman historian Pliny the Elder even wrote that officials would inspect the sewers by boating through them. Just stop and imagine that for a second. Floating through a massive underground tunnel of waste for quality control. Hey Sebastian, how was work today? Oh, just rowing a boat through an underground river of poop beneath the city. Same old, same old. As horrifying as that sounds, the Cloaca Maxima was only half of Rome's sanitation genius. The other half was water, fresh, clean water, delivered on a massive scale. The Romans built 11 major aqueducts, pulling water from mountain springs as far as 92 kilometers away. Every single day, these aqueducts poured roughly 1 million cubic meters of water into the city. That's the equivalent of about 400 Olympic-sized swimming pools daily. Why does that matter? Because flushing toilets need water. A lot of it. And here's where the Romans truly cracked the code, something cities like London wouldn't fully figure out for another 1,800 years. You need clean water flowing in, dirty water flowing out, and under absolutely no circumstances should the two ever meet. The Romans understood that rule perfectly. So now they had the infrastructure. All that was left was to build the toilets themselves. Let's step into a typical Roman public latrine, and trust me, the word typical is doing some serious heavy lifting here. One of the best preserved examples comes from Ostia Antiqua, Rome's ancient port city. This particular latrine could comfortably seat more than 20 people at the same time. Think of it as the ancient version of a public restroom, except every stall door has been removed, the toilets are just stone benches with holes carved into them, and everyone can see absolutely everyone else. Imagine walking into a long rectangular room. Lining the walls are continuous marble or limestone benches, raised about half a meter off the floor. Carved into these benches are keyhole-shaped openings, spaced roughly 50 to 60 centimeters apart. That's your seat. No padding. Just cold stone pressed directly against bare skin. And yes, that's bare skin. Pants weren't really a Roman thing. Togas don't exactly come with a zipper. In front of your feet, there's often a narrow channel of flowing water. This isn't where the waste goes. This is for rinsing your cleaning tool, a sponge attached to a stick. We'll return to that particular horror in just a moment. Beneath the bench openings, there's a deeper channel where water flows constantly, carrying waste away into the city sewer system. And depending on the building, that drop could be significant. In multi-story apartment buildings, known as insulae, or in elevated structures built into hillsides, that plunge could easily reach 5 to 10 meters, sometimes even more. Waste didn't just disappear. It fell. Now, about that dramatic 50-meter drop mentioned earlier. Let me be honest with you, we don't have direct records of a latrine with a perfectly straight, documented 50-meter plunge. But here's why that number isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. First, Roman insulae could reach 6 to 8 stories high. Shops occupied the ground floor, while residents lived above. Some upper-floor latrines dropped waste all the way down into basement-level sewers. That alone accounts for 20 to 25 meters. Second, in forts built along cliff faces or structures carved into valleys and hillsides, waste chutes could extend dramatically downward before connecting to sewer channels below. And third, the Cloaca Maxima itself ran incredibly deep in certain sections, especially where water was funneled from Rome's hills down toward the Tiber River. Archaeological excavations have revealed channels sitting 10 to 15 meters below street level. Stack those elements together, a tall building, a deep sewer, and a city built on uneven terrain, and suddenly that 50-meter figure doesn't sound so crazy anymore. While it's definitely on the dramatic end of the scale, the fact that Roman engineering even made such depths possible is genuinely mind-blowing. These weren't just holes dug in the ground. This was deliberate, calculated, and shockingly sophisticated infrastructure, built to handle humanity's messiest problem with brutal efficiency. Now here's where things take a hard left into the truly bizarre. These toilets weren't just practical necessities, they were social hotspots. Romans treated public latrines the way we treat cafes. Deals were negotiated. Philosophical arguments unfolded. Gossip flowed freely. The poet Martial even joked about latrines as places where you'd bump into friends and catch up on life. Philosophers like Seneca complained not about the smell, but about the noise, because everyone was talking at once. There was absolutely no shame attached to communal pooping. In fact, privacy was the strange part. If you were wealthy enough to have a private latrine in your home, people sometimes mocked you for it. Oh, Adrian goes alone. What's he hiding? Sounds suspicious. Probably a traitor. Someone call Caesar. This mindset couldn't be more different from our modern obsession with bathroom privacy, where locking the door feels like a human right. For the Romans, though, this was just Monday. So let's get into the everyday mechanics. How did this actually work in practice? You'd enter a public latrine, often connected to bathhouses, gymnasiums, or forums, places already buzzing with people. Sometimes there was a small fee to get in, maybe a few arses. Yes, that was the real name of a Roman coin, and no, that joke never gets old. Other latrines were completely free, especially ones paid for by wealthy citizens looking to boost their public image. You take a seat on one of those keyhole-shaped openings. That design wasn't random. Narrow in the front, wider in the back, it helped reduce splashback and allowed for, let's say, optimal placement. Roman engineers thought of everything. Now I know exactly what you're wondering. What about toilet paper? They didn't have it. Paper was far too expensive to wipe your butt with. So instead, Romans used something called a tussorium, also known as a xylospongium. This was a sponge attached to a stick, usually about 30 centimeters long. And here's the part that makes modern brains short-circuit: it was communal. Shared. Passed from person to person. After use, it was rinsed in that shallow water channel in front of the seats, often filled with vinegar, salt water, or running water. Yes. A shared poop sponge. Before you completely spiral, historians do debate the details. Some evidence suggests wealthier Romans brought their own sponges, or that certain latrines offered personal ones for a fee. There's also proof that people sometimes used moss, leaves, or even broken pottery shards called peso. But the communal sponge? That was absolutely real, and it was widely used. There's even a recorded story about a Germanic gladiator who, rather than face execution, asked to use the latrine and then shoved the sponge stick down his throat to kill himself. Dark, horrifying, but it tells us one thing clearly: these tools were sturdy enough to be lethal. Once you were finished and cleaned up, you simply stood up and left. Gravity and flowing water did the rest. Waste was constantly carried away through the channels into the main sewer system. Much of this water came from reused bathhouse runoff. Romans would bathe first, and that now dirty water would get a second job flushing toilets. Efficient, clever, and honestly kind of brilliant. But let's not pretend this system was perfect. For starters, sewer rats were a serious problem. Large rats could climb back up through the pipes, and some sources describe people being bitten while sitting on the latrine. Imagine that spike of anxiety every time nature called. Then there was methane. So gas buildup could ignite, and there are accounts of flames shooting up through toilet openings. Yes, exploding toilets. Seneca even wrote about injuries caused by these sudden bursts of fire. Parasites were another issue. Studies of Roman-era remains show that, despite all this advanced sanitation, Romans actually suffered more parasitic infections than people in earlier periods. Why? Because their latrines and bathhouses brought lots of people, and lots of poop, into very close contact, making it easier for parasites to spread. And the smell? Oh, it was bad. Even with all the engineering, these places stank. Romans burned incense, drenched the air in perfume, and sometimes assigned slaves to do nothing but wave fans around to keep air moving. So yes, revolutionary plumbing. But also shared poop sponges, flaming toilet holes, and aggressive sewer rats. The Romans truly lived on the edge. Alright, we've covered the basics. Now let's get into some genuinely mind-blowing Roman toilet trivia. Emperor Vespasian, who ruled from 69 to 79 CE, actually imposed a tax on urine collected from public latrines. Why? Because urine was valuable. It contains ammonia, which was used to clean togas, tan leather, and even whiten teeth. Yes, teeth. Ancient mouthwash was literally pee. When his son complained about how disgusting the tax was, Vespasian supposedly held up a coin and said, "Pecunia non olet," money doesn't stink. That phrase is still used today to mean that money is money, no matter where it comes from. The Romans even had a goddess of sewers named Cloacina, literally the divine protector of the Cloaca. She started as a water goddess and eventually got reassigned to sewers and purification. There was even a shrine built above the Cloaca Maxima in her honor, known as the Shrine of Venus Cloacina. And they didn't stop there. Romans had gods for nearly every bathroom-related function imaginable. Crepitus for flatulence, Stachutius for manure spreading, and Staculius, the god of feces itself. Every bodily function had divine supervision. Oh, and one final detail that feels almost too surreal to be true, some wealthy Romans had their slaves read to them while they used the latrine. Because apparently, even while pooping in public, multitasking mattered. Picture your job listing. Must be comfortable reciting poetry while your employer uses the toilet. And remember that gladiator who ended his life with a sponge stick? That wasn't the only time those things caused trouble. There are written accounts of fights breaking out in latrines where people actually used sponge sticks as weapons. Nothing screams Roman elegance quite like getting smacked with a poop stick. Just like modern bathrooms, Roman latrines were also covered in graffiti. Archaeologists have uncovered messages ranging from political slogans to petty insults to crude little drawings. One famous inscription from Pompeii reads, "Apollinaris, doctor to the emperor, took a crap here." Apparently even imperial physicians couldn't resist bathroom humor. Now let's compare Rome to us. The average Roman used about 50 to 80 liters of water per day for everything: bathing, drinking, toilets, all of it. The average American today uses around 300 liters daily. So despite all our modern tech, we're actually way less efficient with water. Roman sewers were built so well that parts of them are still working 2,600 years later. Modern pipes? We're lucky if they survive 50 years before falling apart. But socially, everything flipped. We went from communal pooping is normal to someone walked into the bathroom and now my body refuses to function. Privacy went from suspicious to sacred. Now imagine if modern offices copied Roman design. Just long rows of toilets. No stalls. Everyone chatting. "Hey James, great presentation earlier." "Thanks, Michael, oh God, Taco Thursday." It would be chaos. Absolute chaos. Somehow, we've evolved backward when it comes to bathroom comfort. Here's the sad part. This incredible system didn't last. When the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 CE, the knowledge and maintenance of aqueducts and sewers mostly disappeared with it. The invading groups didn't have the engineering skill or the organized government to keep these massive systems running. Europe slid backward. No sewers. No running water. Waste in the streets. Chamber pots out the windows. Then came disaster. In the 1300s, the Black Death wiped out about a third of Europe's population, and horrible sanitation was a huge part of why it spread so fast. It wasn't until the mid-1800s, almost 1,400 years later, that cities like London built sewer systems comparable to ancient Rome. The turning point was the Great Stink of 1858, when the Thames basically became an open sewer. The smell was so bad it forced the government to act. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette designed London's sewer system by literally studying Roman engineering. He looked at the Cloaca Maxima and basically said, "What if we just do that again, but with Victorian bricks instead of Roman stone?" Every time you flush today, you're using a system the Romans perfected 2,000 years ago. Fresh water comes in. Wastewater goes out. Gravity does the heavy lifting. Same idea. Same logic. And in Rome, you can still see it. You can walk over parts of the Cloaca Maxima. You can visit ancient latrines in Ostia Antica, in Ephesus in Turkey, and across Roman sites in North Africa. These toilets outlived the empire that built them. There's something strangely beautiful about that. The empire collapsed. The armies vanished. The emperors faded into textbooks. But the toilets? The toilets kept working. Quietly. Faithfully. Century after century. Maybe that's Rome's real legacy, not the battles or statues, but the boring, unglamorous systems that made everyday life possible. So, did ancient Romans really have toilets where poop dropped 50 meters straight down? Sort of. The number is exaggerated, but the massive scale of their buildings and sewer depths was absolutely real and absolutely mind-blowing for the ancient world. More importantly, they built a sanitation system so advanced that when it vanished, humanity suffered for over 1,000 years. That's not drama. That's history. If you made it this far without losing your appetite, congratulations. You are now officially the most dangerous person at any party when ancient bathrooms come up. You're welcome. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Roman rear ends, hit that like button so the algorithm gods smile upon us. Subscribe if you haven't already, more curious stories are on the way. Drop a comment and tell me what you think about Roman toilets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.